Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the Federalist Papers to look at Alexander Hamilton's urgent, almost desperate case for the U.S. Constitution. You see, he wasn't just seeing a political disagreement, he saw a patient on the brink of death. Right off the bat, Hamilton frames this whole debate with this powerful medical metaphor. He's saying, look, before we can even talk about a cure, which for him is the Constitution, we have to be brutally honest about the sickness. He's basically putting on a lab coat and positioning himself as a political doctor, about to give a diagnosis the young nation desperately needed to hear. Okay, so let's get into this diagnosis. Hamilton is about to perform what you could call a political autopsy on America's very first government, the Articles of Confederation, to show everyone just how deep the rot goes. Yeah, you can forget that triumphant story of winning the war and everything being great. The reality in the 1780s, it was a real mess. The country was acting more like a loose, bickering club of 13 little nations than one unified country. And in Hamilton's eyes, the Articles of Confederation weren't just failing to fix it, they were the disease. So, the very first symptom Hamilton points to is the most fundamental one of all. The national government under the Articles was, well, a government in name only. It had, as he put it, a total want of a sanction to its laws. That word, sanction, is everything here. Think of it as the teeth of any government, the actual power to back up its own rules. Without it, laws are just, well, they're just suggestions. And as Hamilton saw it, those suggestions were being ignored left and right.
And this created this absolutely absurd, pointless cycle. Congress would pass a resolution asking for troops or for money, but if a state just said, nah, not feeling it, that was it, game over. Hamilton called it an extraordinary spectacle. A government that couldn't even enforce its own laws? It was a joke on the world stage.
And the problems just kept piling up. I mean, when a rebellion like Shays' Rebellion flared up in Massachusetts, the national government couldn't do anything but watch. When a treaty was signed, you could have 13 different state courts interpret it 13 different ways. It was a perfect recipe for absolute chaos. So, this massive power vacuum leads directly to the next symptom because, a government that can't enforce its laws, it's also a government that can't manage its money. And that led to a complete and total financial meltdown. Now get this, the central government couldn't tax anyone directly. It could only make requisitions, which is a fancy way of saying it sent bills to the states, based on this quota system. And Hamilton argued this system wasn't just broken, it was dangerously, deeply unfair. Hamilton's economic point here is actually pretty genius. He argued that, yeah, a state like Virginia might have a ton of land, but a smaller state with a super busy port could have way more active wealth, actual money moving around. So trying to tax them based on a simple formula like land value, it was bound to crush some states while letting others get off easy. And this lack of control basically turned the states against each other. It was like the Wild West of trade. New York could slap a tax on goods coming in from New Jersey. The states were having trade wars with their own neighbors. And you have to ask yourself, why would a major power like Great Britain sign a trade deal with the U.S. when they knew any one of the 13 states could just ignore it tomorrow? And here's the kicker. The system wasn't even truly democratic, because every state got just one vote. A small group of states with very few people could band together and block the will of the majority of Americans. This, Hamilton basically screamed, flew in the face of the fundamental maxim of Republican government. Okay, let's recap. We've got a government with no real power and absolutely no money. So it follows, logically, that it also has no way to defend the nation. This was Hamilton's third and maybe the most terrifying diagnosis.
Trying to raise an army was just a nightmare. Congress would ask the states for men, and the states would start a bidding war against each other, offering huge cash bonuses to get soldiers. It was slow, it was crazy expensive, and it was totally unreliable. Hamilton just called it a system of imbecility in the Union.
Now this was the big one. This was the fear in the back of everyone's mind. I mean, these people had just fought a revolution against a king who had a powerful standing army. The idea of giving their new government that same power, that felt incredibly dangerous, and Hamilton knew he had to tackle this fear head-on. The Constitution's solution was just a brilliant compromise. It doesn't give the president a blank check for a massive army. No way. Instead, it puts the power of the purse, the money, squarely in the hands of Congress. And it forces them to have a public debate and reapprove funding for the army every 2 years. It's a safety switch, a check on power, built right into the system. All right, so after painting this incredibly grim picture, this diagnosis of weakness, injustice, and constant danger,
Hamilton was finally ready. He was ready to present his cure, a new constitution, one that would create a government with real energy and authority.
And here is that cure in a nutshell. The new government would no longer have to go begging to the states. It would have the power to enforce its laws on you and me, on individual citizens. It would have the authority to tax us directly. And it would have the ability to raise its own national army. This is a radical shift in the very DNA of American government.
For Hamilton, it all boiled down to this one simple, unbelievably logical principle. If you're going to give a government a job to do, like, say, defending the entire country or managing the economy, you absolutely must give it the power, the means, to actually get that job done. Anything else is just setting it up to fail from the start.
And this, right here, was the masterstroke. Hamilton argued that the Articles were weak because they were just a flimsy agreement between state governments. But the new Constitution, it would get its power from a much, much higher source, directly from the consent of the people themselves. Its authority wouldn't flow from state houses. It would flow from us.
Hamilton's diagnosis and cure literally reshaped a nation. But that central tension he was wrestling with, that tightrope walk between a government strong enough to actually work and the safeguards we need to make sure that strength doesn't become tyranny, well, that's a debate that never, ever ends. It's the very same question we are all still trying to answer today.